in more weight, kind of like a drill sergeant does to his newest recruit. I mean, we're going to break this stuff down. So, number one, what is a VA loan? A VA, and I like to just read the definitions for you. A VA loan is a mortgage loan for service members that is guaranteed, key word there, guaranteed by the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. Its main purpose is to help veterans finance a home with favorable loan terms. That is what a VA loan is for. Now, who's eligible, right? Great. Everybody's hearing this going, that sounds cool. And if you don't know, right, and when we do this show, we want to break it down and make it as remedial as possible. So who's eligible? Well, obviously a veteran, active service duty member, National Guard, reserves, surviving spouse. But let's break it down even from there. So active duty. Active duty who has served 90 continuous days. A veteran who meets the length of service requirements, which is generally 90 days in wartime and 181 days in peacetime. Okay? That's for active. Let's talk about National Guard and reserves. 90 days of active duty or 6 creditable years in the reserve or National Guard. So if you're just joining, we're talking about who's eligible for VA loans. And then a surviving spouse. A lot of folks aren't aware of this. We just did one for a surviving spouse. A veteran who's passed while in service or service-connected with a disability or not remarried. And not remarried. So just did one. Unfortunately, husband passed away several years ago from a disability, military, wanted to buy a house, moved, relocated here, left. They were in Virginia. She moved back home, and we were able to use her benefits, her as the surviving spouse of a veteran. Great question this week from Beth in Orange Beach. And her question was, Dwayne, what do they mean when the media says we're in a housing recession? Okay, so that's a great question. And what I want everybody to understand, you know what you're not hearing about anymore? Man, where's all those housing crash people? The house market's going to crash. Remember we kept telling you, no shot, never going to happen. But what they mean by that, Beth, is it's the number of sales, the number of transactions, right? So that's what they're looking at. So when they say a recession, it's the number of transactions. For instance, existing home sales. You know, you had in 2021, you had 6.2 million existing home sales. Then you had last year 5 million. That's going to be probably close to 4 million this year. You know, you're going to have, now, existing home sales are up a little bit, but overall, you're going to be down over 1 million sales. So that's what they mean when you hear them saying you got to keep in mind, because you'll see a headline, and we tell you what to think about headlines, right? But you'll see a headline, housing headed for a recession? Then the next headline is why home prices won't crash in the next recession, right? And there's a lot more starting to come out where people are getting on board with what we've been telling you for the last year. We told you, been doing this for 30 years. The water's going to be choppy for the next year, right? We told you this in the beginning of the year. We said, hang on. I know how to navigate. I'm going to help you navigate. And that's what we've been doing all year. And I get the thank yous all the time. So that's what they mean when you say housing recession. You've got lower units, right? So think about that. You got lower transactions. But you got to keep your eye on the price too. And understand that's why I also want you to realize why there's never going to be a crash. You got lower transactions. Yet median home prices are up, even though interest rates are up, right? Because of inventory. Because of inventory. So great question there. I hope that answers. But the main thing when you're doing a VA loan, folks, if we are to look at what some of the disadvantages are, is the number one thing is the funding fee, right? I mean that's a number that can't be controlled. It's for instance, on an FHA loan, it's 1.75. So if you have 100,000 loan and do a FHA, your loan amount's going to be 101,750, right? To 1.75. So VA first time, hey, it's going to be 100,000 loan. If your first time, it's going to be 102,300. It goes on top. It affects it by pennies, but it can add up, right? And when we're in the buying power situation that we're in right now, every little bit counts. Okay, now. Some other things you want to look at when it comes to VA is it needs to be a primary residence. Okay? Has to be a primary residence. Limited flexibility, and what I mean by that is, look, while we've told you this 8 million times on Mortgage Gumbo, when it comes to buying a house, we don't require an inspection, but we recommend it.
2 minutes.
Same thing with termite. Don't require it, recommend it. VA requires it. So sometimes when you're buying a house through VA, I kind of want you to look at it, and what I explain to my buyers is look at everything through the eye of the seller, right? You got to come strong with your offer because they know, all right, hey, now we've got to get this inspection, and it matters what's on it, right? The termite certs. So there's not going to be any contingencies. Not that anybody's in the market right now waiving. We'll get back to that, trust me. When this frenzy hits, you're going to get back to people paying, waiving contingencies and all that stuff. But right now, we're not there. So understand that when you're looking at it, you've got to be aggressive on your offer. The other thing is, hey, the appraisal alone can take up to 2 weeks, and you can't rush it. So for every other loan we do in 15 days, our VA usually runs about 20 days, which is still way quicker half the time that most other lenders do it, but it's because the appraisal takes time. So in a hot seller's market, that VA loan isn't always going to be the most attractive. So be aggressive with your offer. It's the best program. Let's dig a little bit deeper into entitlements, right? This is what VA gives to veterans on their behalf. Right? So this is what they kind of entitle them to. And there's what's called full and partial. So for full VA entitlement, who's going to get full VA entitlement is never used your VA loan before. You've repaid your first VA loan in full and you've sold the property. Right? You've experienced a short sale or foreclosure, but you repaid that VA loan in full. The other thing that when you do business with Mortgage Gumbo, unlike other lenders, we don't have loan limits. Most loan companies will limit you to whatever the conforming loan amount is, $762,000. Basically, the number before it's considered a jumbo loan. Many lenders will limit you to that, to giving you a loan limit. We do not when it's a full entitlement. And then you've got partial. So, partial entitlement is if you currently repaying a VA loan, you've repaid a previous VA loan, but you're still in that home. Maybe you refinanced your VA loan into a non-VA loan, and maybe you've had a short sale and you haven't paid it back. So entitlement is basically when you're looking at this, they are telling you exactly how much they are going to secure that property for. Okay? So the other thing let's get into is before we kind of get into the as of a VA loan, which there's not, believe me, it's the best product out there, but I want to kind of give you some things to consider, is how do we know, right? How do we know the entitlement? There's also what's called funding fees, right? So when you have any government loan, you have what's called a upfront, like for FHA, you've got an upfront mortgage insurance. Same thing when you're looking at VA loans. Okay, so we get you have your DD 214, and we request your certificate of eligibility. We can do this for you, right? We can help you with this. But this lets us know, hey, are there any upfront VA charges, right? So what is your funding fee going to be, right? So a lot of times, so if you're disabled, if the VA has deemed you disabled, a lot of times this funding fee will have a waiver. If not, it could be anywhere from, hey, 0.5% to 3.6%, which is probably one of the only disadvantages. It could get a little bit steep. Now, it goes on top, but it just depends, okay? So, for instance, a first-time home buyer, no down payment, when you're looking at your funding fee, hey, it's if you're a first-time home buyer, it's 2.3%. If you're using it for a second time, it's 3.6%. So if you put down 5 or 10%, let's say you still want to use VA, but you're going to put down 5 to 10. Well, now for a first-time home buyer, it's 1.6, and then 10%, 1.4. That's not for you to worry about. That's for us to worry about. But basically, you're going to have a funding fee unless you are deemed disabled by VA. Okay? So those are the things What are the benefits of the VA loan? Well, number one, it's 100% financing. That means no down payment. Folks, that does not mean no closing costs. It means no down payment. 100% financing, meaning no down payment. No private mortgage insurance, aka PMI. So you got 100% financing, but no mortgage insurance. That is awesome. It's government insured. And what this means is, for us, who is a direct lender, as long as we get you where you look at qualification-wise from numbers, that we're very lenient when it comes to credit scores, right? It's not as much of a factor, right? Maybe that 560 on that veteran gets approved. Or I've done VA loans where solid credit score and maybe the back end ratio, which is all your stuff, we'll get into that another time, maybe 55, 60, 65%. Benefits are reusable. You can use them as often as you want. You pay off a VA loan. Hey, I bought a house with a VA, Dwayne. I'm coming back to you. I'm selling this house. I want to buy another house. Am I eligible for VA again? Heck yeah, you are. And also 4% seller concessions. So the seller can pay 4% of those closing costs. So a lot of time with our veterans, you don't come out of pocket with anything. And then on the refinance side, it gets even better. You can do up to 100% financing, right? And then the VA IRRRL, which is a streamline, and it's not after some general named Earl. It's IRRRL, interest rate reduction refinance loan, 100% financing, right? Refinance, no job check, no appraisal required, and we just lower your rate. It's an amazing product. Was doing these by the dozens in 20 and 21. So those are, when you're looking at the benefits of a VA loan,